On this episode of China Uncensored, how would President Hillary Clinton handle the South China Sea dispute? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. The South China Sea. $5 trillion worth of shipping goes through here every year. 7 countries have competing claims, but China is taking its claims the furthest. It's been rapidly building facilities on disputed reefs. Basically, China has a Charmander with 2,000 combat points sitting atop the world's most contested Pokemon gym. So, will Team Blue dare to challenge Team Red? Well, that may depend on who the next president is. In this 2-part series, I'm joined by Senior America correspondent Matt Gnazda. On today's episode, Hillary Clinton. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Hi, Chris.
If Hillary Clinton becomes the next U.S. president, how would she handle the South China Sea dispute?
Hillary Clinton has been accused of many things, Chris. But one of them that's hard to dispute is that she's firmly status quo.
Meaning?
She wants things to get better, but still pretty much within the same framework as before. Except, obviously, with herself as president.
So what does this mean for the South China Sea?
Clinton has been involved in the South China Sea since ancient times, Chris. Back in 2009, her first overseas trip as Secretary of State was to Asia. She made 61 more visits to Asian countries after that, and that's way more than average. And one of her key missions was building an alliance among Asian countries to counterbalance China.
Like the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah, that's one of them. The TPP is an economic agreement among 10 countries, half of them in Asia, but none of them are China. If it gets ratified, it'll boost trade between the US and a bunch of countries that are not China.
In other words, big businesses will be able to get their stuff made in other third world countries for cheap.
Don't be so cynical, Chris, even though that's completely true.
Okay, but what about China's military buildup in the South China Sea?
Well, Clinton helped Obama design the so-called pivot to Asia, a term she accidentally coined in 2011. It's a way of shifting U.S. attention to Asia with the not-so-secret mission of containing China and North Korea.
And what was Clinton's play here?
First, building diplomatic guanxi, relationships. She spent much of her 4 years as Secretary of State building relationships with other Asian countries, letting them know that the U.S. is their friend and friends stand together against an encroaching China. And second, backing that up with a strong military presence. The U.S. spends about $6 billion a year to maintain 80,000 troops and more than 100 military installations in Japan and South Korea. Plus, the U.S. has military agreements with the Philippines, Singapore, and others in the region.
So, under President Clinton, it would be like the U.S. knocks on China's door to ask for a peaceful relationship, while standing behind her is an entourage consisting of pretty much everyone else in the region.
Right. But she absolutely does not want a war, and I think she'd avoid that at all costs.
But China is already sort of at war with the U.S. China has thousands of spies. They've hacked into U.S. infrastructure. They know U.S. military secrets.
Exactly. Now, I don't doubt that the U.S. could beat the Chinese military in any boots-on-the-ground conflict.
America.
But war isn't about who can kill more people. It's about who can make the other side give in first. And China's spies and hacking you mentioned could devastate the U.S. in ways that are hard to fathom. So Clinton doesn't want the kind of war where China pulls out all the stops.
So how can she prevent war?
Well, I think she's willing to work closely with China, no matter how anti-China her campaign rhetoric may sound from now till November. Look, in 2008, Senator Clinton said President Bush should boycott the Beijing Olympics because of China's human rights problems. But then, in 2011, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was eager to show up at China's Shanghai Expo. She even helped raise money for the American pavilion there.
Are you saying she's a hypocrite?
I'm saying she's a politician. And she would be the kind of president who does whatever it takes to protect U.S. interests in the region, whether that means being best buddies with China's dictators or punching them in the mouth, or some awkward combination of both.
And what about Donald Trump?
Oh, well, I suppose I'd have to think about that. Probably that's a whole other episode, Chris.
I think you're right. So for more, click here for our next episode, How Would President Trump Handle the South China Sea? And tell me what you think Hillary Clinton would do, if elected, to preserve U.S. interests in the South China Sea. Leave your totally unbiased political comments below. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time. If you haven't noticed the giant ad for Communist Party mouthpiece Xinhua in the center of Times Square, you're probably playing too much Pokemon Go. Nothing speaks to the glory of Tibetan Buddhism like core socialist values.